In this example, we're going to be using Cornerstone Exercise 627 that can be found in your textbook on page 265. We are again going to calculate equivalent units and cost per equivalent unit, but for non-uniform inputs. In this example, they give us the following information. They tell us that we had units in process at the start of the month that were 50% complete with respect to conversion of 5,000 units. They tell us during the month that the units that were completed were 32,600 and that units in process at the end of April were 60% complete. There were 6,000 units. Remember, with respect to conversion, they're talking about conversion cost. And we know that conversion cost includes direct labor and overhead. They then give us our cost for both materials and conversion for work in process and the current period. They tell us here that all the materials are added at the beginning of the process. That is telling us that we are using non-uniform inputs, meaning that as soon as a unit is started, all the direct materials needed are put in production. Therefore, the only remaining costs are dealing with conversion. So, in the first part, we need to calculate our equivalent units. Again, we are using the weighted average method, and we know that we just need to deal with units completed and equivalent units for ending work in process. Again, the assumption is, under the weighted average method, that our beginning work in process units are included in the units that were completed. In this problem, they tell us that we had 32,600 units that were completed. If the units were completed, that means they were 100% completed with respect to the materials needed and to all conversion. They tell us that we have units in ending work in process of 6,000. And they're 60% complete. We know from right here that all the materials are added at the beginning of the process. So, although they're only 60% finished, they're considered 100% complete with respect to materials. All the materials were added at the very start of those 6,000 units. Therefore, they're only 60% complete with respect to conversion. So we take the 6,000 units that are in our ending work in process and we multiply it by how complete we were able to get them during the month. In this case, 60%. You will now notice that we have two different equivalent unit amounts, one for materials and one for conversion. In part 2, they want us to calculate unit cost and round our answer to 2 decimal places. Under the weighted average method, we include together the costs for beginning work in process and the current period. Now we need to do it twice for materials and one for conversion. So we'll start with materials. The materials cost associated with our beginning work in process units was $20,000. The total cost of materials added during the period was $62,500. And we're going to divide that by the total equivalent units just for materials of 38,600. So our equivalent unit rate for just materials is $2.14. We will now do the same process for conversion. Our total conversion cost associated with our work in process was $15,000. The total conversion cost that was added during the period was $105,000. And we will divide that by the total number of equivalent units just for conversion, which equaled $36,200. That gives us an equivalent unit rate for conversion of $3.31. Again, both of those equivalent unit rates have been rounded. So in total, for any completed unit, it cost us $5.45. In part 3, we need to calculate the cost of units transferred out and the cost of our ending work in process. For our cost of our units transferred out, we know in total that we transferred out 32,600 completed units. And if they're completed, that means they had to be complete in terms of materials and conversion. So we can simply multiply that amount by the $5.45 total unit cost amount. That gets for us the total cost transferred out of $177,670. For our cost of ending work in process inventory, remember we have two different amounts for equivalent units, one for materials and one for conversion. So we need to apply that out to determine the cost of our ending work in process. We will take our equivalent unit rate for materials of $2.14 and multiply it by our equivalent unit for materials of 6,000. We will add to that the $3.31 per equivalent unit rate for conversion and multiply that by how many equivalent units there were in ending inventory for conversion. And we calculated that in part 1, and that was 3,600 units. So in total then, that gets us our total cost of ending work in process of $24,756.